Today on LatinX Mentor, we continue our conversation with our esteemed guests, Chief Justice Rebeca Martinez, Chief Justice Yvonne Rodriguez, and Chief Justice Dori Contreras. Is anything that you can think back on in your life that might have made you choose the path of least resistance, where you don't go, you don't go to school, or you don't decide to start your family, or you don't, whatever you felt might have been the easier path to choose, and you made that decision in that moment that you can think of, no, I'm gonna go do this, and I know it's gonna be hard, and I know I might not make it, but I'm gonna try. Do you think there's anything that might have made you choose that path of least resistance?
Can I just share that I kind of disagree with the premise of your question? Because the premise of your question is that school is not the path of least resistance. Working is often the hardest thing to do. So, because in my generation, kids just on their parents' dime or signed on the dotted line for a loan and went to school. It was almost postponing having to figure out what they were going to do for their life. Let me just go to college and tuck myself away in academia for a while because I don't have to want to be an adult. That's not necessarily true.
But I think the question is posed to maybe some kids whose parents didn't go to college, don't have any money. So they're thinking, okay, I'm getting out of high school. Do I go try to get student loans? I don't even know where I'm going to live. I've never been over there. Or do I just go get a job at Walmart and start working? And so that for them, the path of least resistance may be, let me just get a job and work and help my family versus, or maybe they have a 1-year-old. And they're thinking, okay, I just need to work and get make some money, or do I risk everything and go try to go to college and go try to do some? And I think that's maybe if somebody's listening out there that is in those type of situations, I think these are perfect role models of how you chose, what may have been a really difficult path,
I apologize, but even after school, you still had to make that decision to go run for judge, and that was a lot of work. And every day you choose to come to work, and what you do is very impressive. In
college, first, I like to share the story just because I know there are a lot of students that are in this same position. As I mentioned earlier, I became a single mom when I was a junior at UT, and she was born in July. So I went home to the summer and stayed with my mom and dad when she was born. And then I enrolled in the local university there in the Valley that fall. But I wanted to go back to UT because I wanted to get my degree from UT. At that point, I decided I want my degree from UT. And my friends were saying, why don't you just stay home with your mom, let your mom help you, and just finish school here. Or why don't you leave Lisette, my daughter, with your mom and you go back? And I said, no. I said, number one, I want my degree from UT. By then I was determined. And, she's not my mom's responsibility. She's my responsibility. So when she was 6 months old, I packed up and went back to Austin. And I took advantage of resources that were available, such as, housing for students that are married or with children. I found a lady that took care of children in her home. I had loans, grants, and I even got on food stamps. And I did what I needed to do so that I could finish. And I needed another full year. Actually, I went through the summer too, from January through December. Not to say that it was easy. It was not. It was hard. And I know that there are students out there or young people that become parents in high school or right after high school, like I did, and see that having children is an obstacle because it's hard. It's hard. I'll kid you. I'm not going to say it's not. And so I always encourage students that I talk to, wait to have children, wait to get married, go to school, get your education, because it's just tougher. You can still do it.
Raising kids is hard, right?
Raising kids is hard. And you can still do it. It's just more challenging. Like I said, I can remember, I have lots of memories, but one in particular where I had a final exam the next day. She wasn't feeling well. I was up all night with her in a rocking chair. She's crying and crying and crying, and I'm crying and crying and crying, and thinking, okay, I'm not going to make it. So, I guess to answer your question, the path of least resistance would have been for me to stay home and just make it a little bit easier on me. But I was at that point determined. And my point is so that there are resources available, take advantage of them.
Mm-hmm. So to my original question, is there anything that you can think of that might have made you choose that path of least resistance?
That I can think of that might have, maybe fear of not succeeding, fear of not being able to do it. And I didn't do it all alone. I have a great supportive network of friends and family. And my parents were still very helpful. My dad would come pick her up when I had final exams, and sometimes, or different things like that. But they were very supportive of that. So that's important, is to have a network of supportive friends and family. Don't ever underestimate that importance.
I just want to mention the purpose behind my question is really to show you are human. You have been through a lot of the same things that other people have been through, to show the thought process behind the decisions that you made that got you where you are. Because a lot of times people can think, no, this is it. Nobody's gone through this. I have to, choose whatever is easiest, or maybe not easiest, but this is impossible for me to reach. So
right.
It's not impossible.
No, it's never impossible. It's all a matter of, what you choose to do. And if you want to, you've got to put the energy behind it. But anything can be accomplished.
No, and when I spoke about going, returning back to college when I was 26 or 27, I think I was 31 when I went to law school. I was 35, 34 when I became an attorney. I thought I was the oldest one in the room, too. And there were people older than me in law school. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think, oh, well, you were 18 and you went to college and you went straight to law school. That did not happen. And when I went back to college and I decided I'm going to go get my degree, my dad had gone through a custody battle. He won custody of his 3 young sons. So he said, come help me raise my sons, run my business, and go to school full time. That was one of the craziest things I ever did. And I did it. And my dad was a Hispanic machismo, so I did all the cleaning. I did all the laundry. I did 3 meals a day. When they were going to school, they got lunch. But I raised my brothers, and I went to college full time. And there were some semesters I took 18 hours.
Wow.
And I was expected to get straight A's.
Wow.
I tried. I did fairly well. I started out at a community college. I did 2 years at a community college, and then I went to 2 years to university. So when I got to law school, I wasn't in that same situation anymore, but nonetheless, it was extremely difficult. And I think the only thought that kept me going to school every day was, okay, if I don't do this, then I'm going to have to be the only jobs I really qualified for were minimum wage jobs. That's all I'd ever worked. So I was going to either be in Walmart or I was going to be in an office. I was going to be a receptionist. And that's all I was going to do the rest of my life. And I'm not trying, honestly,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with
okay.
that. But for me, I wanted more.
Yes.
And so that's what got me up out of bed every morning. I was like, okay, do you want to go to school and get this done? Or do you want to go back to
what you had already done and decided was not for you?
Exactly.
And I think if kids are watching this, it's probably kids that want something higher than maybe regular, jobs or day jobs, I guess.
I mean, over time, I think if you work really hard, I don't care what industry you can, if you work hard and you think intentionally about what you're doing, I think you can make progress wherever you go. I really do. But for me, it was the same thing in law school. There are a lot of mornings that I just wanted to turn over in bed and not go to school. Mm-hmm. But I knew that the day I started doing that was the day I started quitting. Mm-hmm. And if I quit, and I used to make a joke, it's half a joke and half not. I said, I'm going to go to law school every morning until somebody stands at the door and tells me, no, you can't come in. Until somebody does that, I'm going in every morning. And that was it.
So can you identify the 3 of you have a similar drive, obviously, right? You not only did you have to go to college and then go to law school, overcome all these obstacles, and then go practice in your career where you were probably the only woman of color in many of the rooms that you stepped into, but then say, I'm going to run for judge and I'm going to run for the Court of Appeals, and then I'm going to run for chief of the Court of Appeals. Obviously, you have something inside of you that gives you that drive, that has that drive. Is there anything you can identify that maybe some kids watching would be able to identify?
Maybe we're a little crazy.
I think you have to be a little bit of a risk taker. I think you've got to be somebody who doesn't really care what other people think all the time. I will tell you, it took my best friend 2 months talking to me every day to convince me to run for the Court of Appeals. And the reason I wouldn't run was because I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I was good enough. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not qualified. And she did. For 2 months, every day. And then finally, I guess she convinced me. I don't know.
That's a very common thing, unfortunately, especially among women that choose to run for office, or even if the thought is even put in their mind, they're like, oh, no, I'm not ready, or no, I'm not qualified, or I can't for this reason, or can't for that. We are our own worst enemies when it comes to that. And that's something that we have to overcome, because
But a lot of
we do need to recognize that we are as capable and we are as qualified and we can do the work.
Yes, and I come from a sociology background, so I do want to point out that it's not necessarily that we intrinsically think that about ourselves. That is what you have been taught from a very young age. That's what's been socialized into you. So you can pull that out of you. You can recognize that this is what other people have told you, or the women around you since the beginning of, your consciousness. That is not what you are telling yourself, and that is not what you're going to take with you throughout your life.
Right. So when I share this story with young students, because when I was at UT, there was a system of a shuttle bus system that would take you, on and off campus, and we would always go by the law school. And I didn't know lawyers, I didn't know anybody. Then the law students would get on, and in those years, they had these big old giant books, and I used to look at them in awe and think they had to be geniuses. I really believed you had to be a genius to go to law school, and I was in college. And of course, then, as I mentioned, when I graduated, I needed to work and support my daughter. So law school was never on my radar at that point. And it wasn't until years later when I was in Houston, and a friend of mine from the Valley, who is a lawyer here in San Antonio, by the way, to this day, he knows I tell the story because I knew him, I could relate to him, and he was in law school. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
He can do it.
Yeah.
But that's a great story.
People need to know that you may think that it's not something that you're capable of, but don't underestimate yourself.
But that's a great
ever.
story that I think a lot of kids need to hear, right? Is I know from personal experience, same, oh my God, lawyers must be geniuses. And then judges must be geniuses. And you kind of, oh my God,
we're not geniuses.
And
We're not geniuses.
Well, you walk in the room and you're like, they're just like us.
Yes.
We're imperfections, faults. We have questions. Everybody, you walk into rooms where you think people are supposed to be at this level, and you realize they're just like you and me. Everybody's kind of trying to make it their way through life. And so a lot of these kids that have these insecurity complexes of, oh my God, am I smart enough? If you can put the hard work in, if you're dedicated to putting the hard work in and reading, and I think the common thread has been hard work. You don't just say, okay, yeah, I belong here, I'm here, I got to be here, and you got to accept me. No, you got to put the hard work in, and you've got to be dedicated.
Key. That's the key in everything. Yeah,
in everything.
Hard work.
You got to put the time in.
But then you walk into that space and you realize, hey, man, they're struggling just like I am.
Yes.
They're doing the same thing I am. And so I think that's really important for everybody to understand, is that what you guys are saying is you had those same insecurities that probably some kids that are maybe thinking about applying to law school that are saying, I don't belong there because I don't think I'm smart enough.
Even when I was at UT, I was very insecure. I was intimidated by a lot of things, and I really didn't think I was smart enough or as smart as everybody there. And it's not true, but that's, we question ourselves. And so we have to just overcome that.
And beyond hard work, I think what I've noticed from all three of you is it also is that self-confidence, because you've proven yourself to yourself, and that risk-taking that, you're not going to play it safe. There's something that you want, and you're going to do what it takes to get there.
That's not a common denominator for everybody, though. Even students sitting in law school, they don't have all three of those bullet points. They really don't. Those that have struggled to get there, I have found have common denominators. They have that sort of work ethic, that will, right? Because you may not have the smarts or the grades or whatever, but if you have a will, like, just tell me what to do and I'll get it done. I have that kind of a will. Will is different than want. I'd love to be a lawyer. Just hand me a law degree and that's what I want. But they don't have the will to get to from point A to point, Z. And that's what distinguishes those who do get past, whatever you have to get past to do what you want to do, whether it's, to get a college degree or even 2 years associate's degrees because you want this, career and you need that. Sister-in-law wants to be a nurse. Okay, well, I need to do this. Then I need to take these classes. And it doesn't matter. Again, no measuring stick. It's not, yes, there might be a 2-year class or a 4-year degree plan or whatever. Just have the will to do it. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. We've got, St. Mary's Law School is the first in the country to actually offer OSEC. It's the first online class. It's like, I think it's 4 years, maybe it takes a little bit longer, but they all have full-time jobs. But at night, they're sitting online taking a law class. And that's not just for the law. It's for every other profession. I've got nephews who want to be a firefighter. Okay, what do I need to do? And those that have the will get it done. Some of them won't even go and pick up an application. Like, well, then it's not because you're afraid. You don't have the will. And so for me, it's just ganas. ¿Qué ganas tienes? Do you have the ganas to do something? Because if you have the ganas, nothing's going to stop you from doing it. My only lesson I'll share is that there's a one word, and it's the bravest word that you can ever say, and it's really hard to say it. Do you know what it is? Help. The bravest word in the vocabulary in the dictionary is called help. And I, for one,
afraid to ask for it.
I, for one, was I guess the one thing that I wish I had more of. I wish I was more brave to ask for help, because I suffered from this thing where if I asked for help or if I asked a question, please tell me how to do this, or what's the how-to, it's like I'm showing how, uninformed I am, how ignorant I am, how unprepared I am, and that translated not just in high school, but in college and in the workforce and at work, my first law firm. And I was like, I'm not going to ask anybody for help because they're going to know that I don't belong here. Why didn't you go in? My fault. But I was already trained to figure it out, because if I asked my Dad, why is the sky blue? I've got a book report. I got to write to go look it up. So I had to go to the encyclopedia, figure out where to get the answer and get it done. That's called critical thinking skills. And I'll say this, your generation doesn't have that. You're already disadvantaged because you ask Siri, please tell me why is the sky blue? Where's this? How to get from, I had to read a map to go from point to find your address. I had to read a map.
They're asking Siri what an encyclopedia is right now,
And now with AI chat, it's like, okay, now could you write me a book report on why the sky blue and the fraction of light. Don't be doing that. But like I said, if you're gonna let someone else be your brain, your brain is a muscle. You got to work it out. And if you're not working your brain out, reading, writing, doing something intellectually stimulating, whatever it is, not just going in and watching your friends post pictures of what they're about to consume. I'm telling you, if that is the most interesting thing about your friends' lives, those are probably not the friends that you need to surround yourself, because that's not intellectually stimulating. And you need to be able to stimulate your will, your why on what it is that you want to do, and then just do it and ask and be brave enough to ask for help, whether it's a school counselor or a friend, or maybe if you are in school right now, whether it's in high school or in college, you should be asking at least one question from anybody, your teacher. And I'll tell you another quick question. It's a question you should always ask. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
That is actually an amazing question that segues into what I really wanted to ask. One of the I think most helpful things to know for me is, if you could go back in time and speak to yourself at any point in your life, which point in your life would you choose and what would you say?
There's probably a whole bunch of them. But first of all, beginning with that high school boyfriend. I don't know why I listened to him. But I think that I would go back to my younger self, especially in college. And speaking of confidence, instill more confidence in myself and do more along the lines of what Chief Justice Martinez said, is get more engaged with my professors, ask more questions, I was scared. I really was intimidated. And I maybe, my grades were okay. Maybe they could have been better had I been more confident at that time. But I was very intimidated when I was at UT.
And I think, I think mostly in my 20s, I think, and maybe even when I was a high school student, I think it's a fear of failure. I think it took me a long time to overcome that. And I remember, again, my daughter asking me, like, what if I apply to this college and they say no? And I'm like, and so.
That's true.
I'll frame that one just the same way I'll frame everything else. So there you go. But that everybody falls down. Everybody falls down. I've lost campaigns. I've won campaigns. And I think the thing I learned to internalize or understand is I had a bigger regret of not trying than I did of failing.
When I decided, was just trying to decide whether to run for Chief Justice, because I had been on the court already at that point, 18 years. And so I didn't have to run for chief, but a very wise person said to me exactly that. If you don't, are you going to regret it? And I knew the answer was yes. So I ran.
And Chief Justice Martinez, do you have anything?
Things that I kind of regret?
No, that you would go back in time.
That I would go back in time and change. There wouldn't be anything in terms of an event or a failure, because I think all of those define who I am now. And if I change any one of them, if I didn't fail, if I didn't hit that obstacle, if I didn't, fall into the abyss that is a whatever sinkhole that maybe I didn't look out for, just leapt right in and go, yeah, I don't regret, like, Chief Share, I don't have any regrets, except for maybe wanting to do more of something. I was part of that generation of young lawyers who, and I went to law school, that like, you're supposed to do this, and then you're supposed to do this, then you're supposed to do this and go into this and get in a big law firm and then clerk for a judge and do all the to-dos that I was checking off. And I lost track of what is most meaningful. Now you're sitting in our courtroom and you see the bench behind us, and every month, the San Antonio Bar Association and the court has always honored a lawyer who has passed in the prior year, and we call them court memorials. And we've had it a tradition that was started by Chief Justice Cadena, who's this building is named after, in part, the Cadena Reed's Justice Center, and began this memorial to celebrate the lives of lawyers and judges, members of the bar. And it's the most important and my most favorite thing that I get to do, on the court. So they come in and there's there's a person that will speak on behalf of the family, maybe a family member, and they talk about the life of the lawyer and or judge. And the ones that for me are most meaningful are not when they come up and say they tried the most cases and they made the most money and they were the best judge and the best trial lawyer. That doesn't resonate with me. It's the stories that come in and talk about the human being outside of their role as a lawyer, or not as someone who wore a robe, but how they breathed in life, the family and the friends and the impact that they've made outside of the courtroom, right? What they did to, jump out of planes or serve their country, or all the little different things that you've heard even just from my colleagues here. That is what I would want. If somebody's memorializing me, I don't want my headstone to say best judge ever. That's not what I'm aiming for. I want to have those kinds of stories about how I breathed in life, how I was close to my family, how I wasn't blessed with having a family, but I have extended family, and it's the family that I think I neglected when I was opening up my law office, and making all this money and driving 3 cars and all the stuff that right now, not only that I have, all the material things that as I sit here now, I've disposed of. That's not what I'm going to remember most. It's the past experiences, the weddings and the quinceañeras and the birthdays and the family gatherings and all of that. The time I have with the friends I have been able to maintain a relationship with, which really only goes back to 7th grade, because remember, I at different schools, and we didn't have Facebook back then. We had licking of the stamps and a phone that actually plugged into a wall, like back then. And those are the relationships I felt like I should have fertilized more, and not, sowing my oats as a lawyer, and certainly not as a judge, because right now I'm telling you, my identity is not wrapped up in my robe. And that can be a challenge for those in, leadership, is your identity is who you are to people, because they won't, what did Maya Angelou say? They won't remember what you said. They will always remember how you made them feel.
Which I can attest to, because you were very instrumental in us helping produce this. As soon as I approached her and I said, hey, would you be willing to do this? She's the one that said, why don't we do it in the courtroom? Or why don't we do this? And why don't we do that? And let me reach out. So
one success I had, tell them about Luis Javier.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
That's my biggest pride and joy.
Yeah, my son was like not going to go to law school. And I'd tell him, and they don't listen to their parents at this age. And so then finally he decides, I'm going to go to law school. We're like, okay, well, I'm not going to even rock the boat, say anything. So I was eating with him one time, and I go, so what made you change your mind? He goes, I asked Chief Justice Martinez if she would go to lunch with me, and she talked to me, and she told me some really good advice. And so he's telling me, and that's exactly what I told him.
But it's different when it comes to the parent. Yeah.
And so he's in law school now because of her.
But for his sake, and I do this with all of my mentees too, is I don't say, oh, I'm so brilliant and this is why, and you follow my path. That's not great mentorship. Mentorship is being able to speak to somebody, sometimes again, who you're not related to or not your best friends, and who probably don't even know you, but could give you very objective advice. And for me, the best question is, well, what is it? What do you want to do? What's your why? And what's stopping you? And for him, it was what he felt was a learning disability that he felt he couldn't, with it, that was such a disability that he couldn't go past the check boxes you need to apply to law school and do this and get through the bar exam and get through all of that. And once I'd said, well, get over yourself, because you're not that special. Just because you have a learning disability doesn't mean that you can't succeed in something. And like the chief said, if you don't try, you've already failed.
And think about that was his insecurity, right? That's who we're speaking to right now. It's a lot of young kids. It doesn't matter where they're at. They all have insecurities. We all have insecurities. All right. So being the only male in this conversation, I have to bring it up because I know it exists. Our industry in the legal field, it has been largely dominated for many years by males, and usually non-minority males. Just as this year or late last year, one of the females in my office went to a deposition, and an older male attorney confused her for the court reporter. So it's also a sexist industry. How have you navigated this, especially the three of you that probably went into this profession when it was way more, when it was way more male dominated? How did you navigate? Chief Rodriguez.
I thought about that a lot. So regardless of when I walked in the room, whether there were attitudes of racism or sexism, for me, what I've told people is I've just ignored it. I can't focus on that, and I can't let that negativity weigh me down. And so I just focus on the job at hand and just kind of barrel through. And so it's just water off a duck's back for me. So I don't know. I'll notice it, I'll feel it, and then I just ignore it. because there's no point in initiating a discussion or trying to change people's attitudes. That's not my job, and quite frankly, I'm probably not going to be successful in doing that. So I'm going to perform the job at hand as best as I can, and just move forward.
And was that always, even whenever you were a brand new baby attorney, that you maybe went to the first workplaces?
Yes, I mean, when I started practicing in El Paso, it was the mid-'90s, and women were held to a very strict code of dress. Like, you couldn't show your arm, like the top part of your arm, in some courtrooms. You couldn't wear pants in some courtrooms. It was very
No sandals. You had
yes,
to closed-toed.
Very sexist.
Some even required pantyhose.
That's true. I know.
Were they going to go check? I mean,
yeah, no.
Look at her expression.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, no, and yes, it was very sexist. But the more of us who come into the profession, y'all are changing that every day. When it's your turn to replace us, you're not going to have those kinds of attitudes, and I'm not going to let that stop me.
How have you dealt with
I'm
it?
with Chief Justice Rodriguez. You just have to develop a thick skin, and you just can't let it undermine you in any way. And I did, I had my fair share of inappropriate comments along the way, but nothing that would, I think, that ever, did I get pissed off now and then? Yes, of course, but you just get past it, like she said. But I think it was 92, 93, thereabouts. I was asked to write an article for the Bar Journal, and that particular feature was dealing with, I guess it was gender in the profession. I can't remember specifically, but when I was asked to write something, I thought, what am I going to write about? I was a brand new lawyer, first of all. I got licensed in 90. So this had to have been like in 91 or so or two. And so I sent out a survey to women lawyers, and I got a pretty good, decent response back. I was surprised, and I was surprised by the responses that I received, because a lot of them were along those lines of stories of experiences that they had as women, particularly Latinas. And one in particular I'll never remember, and I quoted it in the article, that said she walked into court, she had her blue suit on, she had her briefcase on. I mean, she looked the part, and she was asked something like that. The judge, I think the judge said, what can I do for you, ma'am, or whatever, and she said, oh no, she was asked, are you a lawyer? And she said she wanted to respond and say, no, I'm here selling tamales. So there were quite a few stories along those lines, and I wrote that article.
So thick skin, let it roll off your back. How have you dealt with it, Chief?
I think, to follow up with Chief Contreras shared, for this generation, you can hear tons of stories about how the women who've come before you have, navigated through those waters, whether it's in court or at your law firm or even your workplace. I mean, it happens everywhere. It happens in restaurants. I mean, going out to eat. That's something that I think women generally will be a constant. And for women of color, it will continue to be a matter to navigate. I think it's important for us to learn the skills on how to respond and not to react. There's a difference. Learning how to respond to not just, sexism or racism or any ism, ageism, is it's a skill set. I think it's something that you can train yourself. You can learn. There's so many resources online on how to respond and not to react. I think that's a skill set that if you can learn in college, I certainly learned it through my human behavior classes, because I was also double majored and one in sociology. And I've learned that learning how to respond was more appropriate for me so that I could exhibit who I was. Because if I respond in a way like, a little smirky to a judge, even, not a good thing for me as a lawyer coming in a courtroom. So learning how to respond to those things And we've all had those stories about walking into a depot and being asked for coffee. I think all three of us have had that. But, responding, like, sure, I'll get you and I'll get myself one. And when I sit down right next to their expert witness and about to do it, their face says something that a light bulb has gone over their head. Again, we have to have empathy that somebody who might ask me for coffee is not a sexist. It's more of an unfamiliarity of seeing a person in your situation, in your role. Because in a legal profession, if you go to a law firm 30 years ago, the only women in there were the staff, right? The support staff. They weren't the lawyers. They weren't the partners. And in some settings, that still remains true. So even getting up on the court and bench here and people come in, I mean, if you look at this courtroom, there's photos of men who have presided over this courtroom, and I don't look like any of them. And people come in, and it's an unfamiliar scene to see. And on my court, it's 6 Latina and 1, non-Latina. So that's a thing. And I have to recognize that. I think we all three recognize that. Not that we've achieved anything. We were born Latina. We didn't become Latina. We were born this way. But we recognize that we, as an example, can serve to inspire and share our experiences and say, hey, it's going to be hard, but you can do it. If I could, as a C+ student, like I could do it as a biology major, as a, former accountant, whatever. That's what we recognize as important part of our role in doing it. But realizing that there are other people that are going to be, I could still go to a judicial conference and I'm asked, am I in the right place, right? Am I the support staff for the hotel? I can have a big chip on my shoulder, which, that would be what I carry. I don't carry it. That's something that they will. And so when they're like, when then somebody comes in, no, the chief, she's with us. Again, another face that says, oh, if that's a learning thing for that person, or if that person is just accepting the fact that they have a bias, don't recognize it in their behavior, but that's not on me.
That's right.
But what's on me is how do I respond to it?
And I guess
what's important too, though, is that in this profession and in every workplace, you don't want to burn bridges with people that are perhaps ignorant, because you're going to cross paths time and time again. As a young lawyer working for Frank Herrera here in San Antonio, I was sitting in his office. He was at his desk, and there was a lawyer that was on a case with us. And they were having a conversation, and I asked a question. And this lawyer turned to me and he said, "Are you a lawyer?" Because I'd never met him before. Just like that. "Are you a lawyer?" And I said, "Yes." I was a young lawyer, but I said, yes. Well, fast forward years later, when I'm becoming a judge and stuff, guess what? I get to know him. He's a big supporter. He becomes a friend, So
I thought he had come in front of your court and you asked him to get you some coffee.
No, but more importantly, again, I think Latinos especially, because certainly I saw it even growing up with my own parents who were, biased against other races, right? Los güeros y los otros y todo, and that we have to recognize that we all suffer from a sense of bias. And in fact, the same reactions that you would expect to get only from an older white male, you're getting those same things from other women of color. So we're challenged by all of those, and we have to understand also, some of my best mentors don't look like me. They're old white guys who have brought me under their wing, gave me a job, asked me to go try a case with them. And so I would be at a disadvantage. I would be lost if I didn't allow myself to enjoy those opportunities, to have relationships with people outside of to embrace them, because 9 times out of 10 in my mind, my default is they're not. They're going to see me. And if, however they see me, that will evolve, because I will do my job the best I can and then be judged by that. So the color of my skin or my gender becomes less important, but we still have that, and we have to recognize it.
And we have to overcome that we don't look like a judge. How often are we told, "Oh, you're a judge? You don't look like a judge."
Because we're unfamiliar. I mean, these students I've never met a lawyer. I'd never met a judge, much less anyone that looked like me when 30 years ago when I graduated from law school. So things are changing.
And what's exciting, I think, for young kids that are listening is that we are really living in changing times. Because you're right, when we look in this courtroom and I look around all of the justices and chief justices that have served before you, it's all almost 95 or 99% white males. But the court, your court, is now all female.
It's not
All female. Justice Chief Rodriguez's court is all female.
We're all Latinas.
All Latinas.
We're all Latinas.
And
On
Chief,
our court, we're 6 on our court and 4 are Latinas.
are Latinas. Yeah, so it definitely, I think times are changing, which kind of goes back to the importance of what you just said is your generation, or I guess our generation and her generation, are really going to shape the future workforce and the future halls of power and how we react. Are we going to react the way that has been the norm? Are we going to be discriminatory? Are we going to be unaccepting? Are we going to be racist, biased, sexist? Because you're right, women can be sexist to other women. Women, Hispanics can be racist to other races or other Hispanics. And so I think that's what's really important or exciting, at least, to see the changes happening in this country, and that you have so many women and minorities that are going to be stepping into positions of power like the three of you are. So I think that's why it's so important for these kids to hear these conversations, because they're going to shape
your
it.
education.
Yes,
it is important.
that was
to,
a point.
To be in these positions, you do have to be educated.
That was a point that I wanted to make is if we want this trend to continue, we have to look at, okay, who are the ones that made this change to begin with? What did they do? They worked hard. They got their education. They worked on their self-confidence. They had the will. Now let me go do that too, if this is what I want to do.
And I'll share with you on that. I've had interns and I have clerks, and I could be the one that limits myself to just the top of the class and the top, and I've had interns that are the top, the first in their class, but they don't have what I'm looking for. Now I know as an employer, what I'm looking for is that X factor, and that X factor is usually all the ganas that you're going to put down that in your resume. You're going to say, I did this and I worked 3 jobs and I waited tables through college. And I'm like, now that person I know is going to be the one that's first here, last to leave, is going to put in the work. If they don't know it, they'll find the answer, they'll get it done. I'd rather have that than someone who was top of their class that really doesn't perform, doesn't have that sort of skill set, that street smarts, right? That's what I'm looking for. And I think more and more employers are looking for it. So don't discount the fact that you've had, embrace the hard.
Yeah.
You got to embrace the hard and then celebrate it when you want to authentically present yourself in an application for a job, for admission into college or law school, because I think that more and more is what we have found to be a factor of success. Your propensity to succeed is shown less by grades now, and it's more about how much did you embrace the hard? How hard was it for you? How much have you overcome? And so lean in on that.
And that's a great, great way, I think, for us to conclude this episode. But I really, really want to thank the 3 Chief Justices of these. You're the only 3 Latina Chief Justices in all the state of Texas right now. So I think that's very, very special. You're definitely trendsetters, leading the way. And I really appreciate the opportunity to sit here with my daughter and who's my boss now and have a conversation with you. And I know that everybody watching is very grateful. And I hope you've learned just as much as we have.
Yes, I truly appreciate. Before we started, I was telling them that as we were doing this research, I was just blown away with how impressive each of you is, how much work you put into getting where you wanted to be. And so I hope that showed through this episode. I hope that everybody got that sense the same as I did. And I really, truly appreciate that you would sit here and share this with not only, us, but everybody else too.
And to all you that are listening, know that we are public servants and we are here for you. And if you ever have any questions that you need asked, please reach out to us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. Thank you. Appreciate your honors.
Yes.
Thank you.
Your honors, yes.
For more content, please like and subscribe and follow us on all social media platforms at LatinX Mentor.